to Caravan to Midnight with Dr. Dave Janda, and as you well know, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. I want to thank you for subscribing to this particular portion of the Caravan platform. I can guarantee you this: I will do everything in my power to provide you information and guests the bought-off, lamestream, fake media will never provide. I believe that's critical because the globalists are intent on stripping you and every American and every person worldwide of their freedoms and their liberties, what's remaining of them. And the only way we defeat the globalists is by outing them, by outing their plans, and by educating and empowering as many people as we can touch. I appreciate you being here. I don't take that lightly. You have many different choices with your time and with your money. It means a tremendous amount to me that you would want to join me and our guests. And I again promise to you that we will bring you to the forefront of what's really happening behind the curtain. Remember, when I first went to Washington in 1988 and started to work with Ronald Reagan, the first thing Reagan taught me was that the right-left axis is purely a deception ploy. It's meant to put people at each other's throats, to distract them, so that they don't realize what's really going on behind the curtain. And what's going on behind the curtain is led by the globalists. The globalists work the up-down axis, up being freedom and down being oppression. And their goal is to strip you and your family and your friends and your neighbors and every American, every person worldwide of their freedoms, and to oppress as many people as possible, to strip people of those freedoms to get further control and power and what drives them, money. As you know, the way I like to start my part of the platform out is with the segment called the WTF segment. Now, what the WTF is happening behind the curtain? What's really happening in the little bits of information we get through the fake media? And what other alternative sources are providing information that could benefit me or you? So let's look at some of the information swirling around both in front and behind the curtain. The globalists are having a lot of trouble of late. And I believe they're having a lot of trouble because platforms like Caravan to Midnight are having more and more subscribers, and more people are becoming aware of the globalist agenda and plans and what they're really up to. And it doesn't stop with you, because what's happening is subscribers of this platform are they're then telling their friends and their neighbors and their coworkers what they're hearing, what they're learning, and they're passing it on. And that's where you're so important. You see, John B. Wells and I can provide information that you're not going to get from any other source. But if it dies with you, yeah, we've made headway, we've helped you, but this is a big bucket brigade. And the caravanners have to network this information within their families, within their communities, within their workplaces. And yes, I know, because I've been there myself. There are times when folks are going to look at you like you have a third eye. Initially, they might, because it's really hard for many people to get their heads around what's really going on about what the globalists are about. But somewhere along the line, something will come out in the fake media that many of these other people watch and listen to. And they'll say, hey, wait a minute. My friend told me about this a month ago, 2 months ago, a year ago. And frankly, I thought that they were kind of crazy, but you know what? They were right. You see, we got to plant the seed, And we can't expect that harvest of that seed is going to come in an hour, a day, a week, a month, sometimes a year. But our role as caravanners is to plant the seed of fact, of reality. Reality that's being distorted by the globalists and one of their tentacles, the media. The lamestream fake media is one of their tentacles. Plant that seed in any person, every person you come in contact with. Because somewhere along the line, they'll come back to you. And they'll go, you mentioned this before. I didn't think you were right, but it did turn out to be the case. What else you got? Let's talk about what's been circling in front and behind the curtain. Let's go to the WTF information. You know, the globalists, as I said, are having a hard time. Their house of cards is falling apart on many different levels. One of the levels is their propaganda arm, the media. People are finally starting to realize, hey, wait a minute, these mainstream media gurus are, in fact, propagandists and liars. Headline, this is from ibankcoin.com, and we have to thank the great James O'Keefe and his outstanding organization, Project Veritas, for this. Headline, CNN exposed an undercover sting. Now, you might say, come on, this is old news. You know what? Unfortunately, to many people, this is new news. This is new news. And this is where we come in. Of taking what we learn here and with John and networking it. CNN exposed an undercover sting. Producer admits Russia story fake news pushed for ratings. Here's how the article starts. A Project Veritas journalist, run by James O'Keefe, covertly filmed a candid discussion with CNN health producer John Bonifeld, where the very fake news network employee admitted that the whole Russia story against President Trump is nothing more than a ratings grab by CNN CEO Jeff Zucker, based on the fact that most of CNN's liberal audience wants to see the president go down in flames. Imagine that. Bonifeld also admitted that he hasn't seen any evidence of President Trump committing a crime. And you're going to say, that's no new news. It isn't to you because you're a member of the Caravan and you have had enlightening information from John B. for years. Those of my listeners from Operation Freedom, my Sunday show, which airs 2 to 5 every week, 2 to 5 Eastern, every week out of the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, which can be streamed at davejanda.com, will say the same thing. That's Dave. Operation Freedom has been around since October 2010. You said this from the beginning of October 2010. True. But just because we know it doesn't mean everybody else knows it. And the vast majority of folks still believe the mainstream, or what I call lamestream fake media, is legit. But they're starting to get a hint that it's not. And probably one of the biggest hints they got is when President Trump was elected. Remember, the night of the election, the New York Times had a 96% certainty as of 5 p.m. on election night that Hillary was going to win. Donald Trump's election was a bit of an eye-opener to a lot of people because they had believed the polls in the New York Times and MSNBC and CBS and NBC and ABC and you name it. And now, their little media idol, CNN, has been taken in the chops for months. And now, Jimmy O'Keefe really did an expose, and as I understand it, more is coming by James O'Keefe and what he uncovered at CNN. And I can tell you personally that I had done a lot of interviews in the mainstream media, lamestream media, when my prevention research first started to take hold. Did the Today Show, Good Morning America, CBS This Morning, the nightly news on NBC, CBS, ABC. They all had feature pieces on our work, PBS, you name it. I mean, I covered a lot of ground in the mainstream. And in fact, back in the late 80s and 90s and up until a particular point in 2001, the media occasionally would let those of us that were on the freedom movement side of the equation, they'd let us out of our little boxes and let us talk about things. But I have to say, and this is not being conspiratorial, it's just a point of fact, something changed September 11th, 2001 in many respects. In many respects. But I have to say, after my last network interview was on Fox News the week before September 11th, 2001. And from that point on, I had never been contacted by the main lamestream fake media. See, I think on September 11, 2001, there's all kinds of things we can get into on that. And obviously, the narrative that has been pushed down the throat of the American and the world public is far from the reality of what happened on that day. But I can also tell you that from that point on, anyone who spoke about freedom, empowerment of individuals, as my message of prevention is all about, that's when the clamps came in. That's when the clamps completely shut off any of us and all of us that were interested and dedicated to promoting the concepts of freedom and individual empowerment as opposed to a government takeover of society. Just a point of fact, not conspiratorial, a point of fact. So the globalists really started to ratchet up with their velvet glove, not even so much velvet glove, many times it's a titanium glove, scrunching freedom as of September 11th, 2001. And their media arm has been an integral player in them tightening that grip of oppression. But it's starting to fall apart. And luckily, because of the alternative media, of which the Caravan to Midnight site can be considered that, and proudly so. Of which I'd like to think my Sunday show, Operation Freedom, is also a part of that. You know, they try to label you. First, they try to label you as a conspiracy theorist. Thank you very much. Then they try to label you as a member of the alternative media. Well, thank you. Thank you. Because I don't want to be a part of the lamestream fake media who are all whores of the globalists. Every single one of them. And for those of you that still believe that Fox is balanced and it's not part of the syndicate, really? Look, I don't care what media outlet you look at in the mainstream, lamestream, they're all owned and operated by the globalist syndicate. And their role is to deceive you, to propagandize you, to keep you in the dark about what's really happening behind the curtain. You see, this CNN piece is just the tip of the iceberg of the expose about how this whole Russian narrative is fake. And we'll get into later today about what the Russian narrative is really all about. But there are more pieces of evidence from the alternative media that are sifting out, that are destroying the globalist narrative of this Russian hacking business that's truly fraudulent. From Powerline, headline, Democrats, FBI collaborated on Trump smear. Again, you might say, come on, Dave, that's no new news. WTF are you bringing this up for? Well, because 99% of folks are shocked when they hear this. Here's the beginning of the story. The New York Post has an explosive report on the infamous dossier that tried to smear Donald Trump in order to swing the presidential election to Hillary Clinton. That dossier being, remember, that fabricated document that was that Trump and some of his other executive buddies went to Russia and they were in collusion with some folks in the Russian government and Russian business, and they were paying hookers to urinate on a bed that Obama and his wife slept on? I mean, you can't even make this stuff up. Well, they did, but the globalists and their little propagandists in CNN and MSNBC and Rachel Maddow and all of them expect you to believe that. You know, Chris Matthews still had a tingle going down his leg when this stuff was coming around. It's ridiculous. Story goes on. The source of the dossier, shocking, is a Democratic Party opposition research firm called Fusion GPS. The Senate Judiciary Committee earlier this month threatened to subpoena the firm, Fusion GPS, after it refused to answer questions and provide records to the panel identifying who financed the error-ridden dossier, which was circulated during the election and has sparked much of the Russian scandal now engulfing the White House. Fusion GPS was on the payroll of an unidentified Democratic ally of Clinton, globalist, when it hired a long-retired British spy by the name of Steele to dig up dirt on Trump. What is shocking is the FBI's apparent involvement in the effort to smear Trump with false rumors. Shocking? No. Expected? Yes. For those that are clueless, shocked. For those of us that are informed, you know what? Standard operating procedure with these dweebs. Goes on. The FBI received a copy of the Democrat-funded dossier in August. We'll get back to that in a minute. During the heat of the campaign, and it is said to have contracted in October, this is the FBI, to pay Steele, this fraud, $50,000 to help corroborate the dirt on Trump. What is Comey and the FBI paying this guy $50,000 for? Oh. They're all globalist tools. A relationship that raises substantial questions about the independence of the FBI in investigating Trump. Duh. It raises more questions than that. According to this article, why was the FBI meddling in a U.S. presidential election? Okay, let's make it easy. Because they're all owned and operated by the globalists, and their role was to make sure their puppet, Hillary, was elected president. It's not that hard. Here's the interesting thing. Remember how in this story they talk about the FBI received a copy of the Democrat-funded dossier in August? You know how that happened? Here's what I hear. My sources tell me that reportedly John McCain, globalist hack, was involved. In fact, he had one of his aides, he flew one of his aides over to Europe, reportedly, to pick up this dossier and to bring it back to his buddy, Comey. Now, on Operation Freedom, we've dissected Comey into pieces. This guy is a globalist hack from the word go. Just one of his roles he was before he was on the FBI, in addition to after having covered up all the Clintons' dirt for years, he was on the board of HSBC. Now, if you saw my interview with Bob Mazur, former undercover agent for the DEA who infiltrated the Medellin drug cartel and became Pablo Escobar's right-hand guy on finance, HSBC was up to its neck, eyes over its head, in laundering money from for the drug cartels. This was going on when Comey was on the board of directors of HSBC. Really? So it should not shock you that the FBI was doing everything in their power because their little puppet Comey, who's owned and operated by the globalists, was running the FBI. But good old Johnny McCain got in the act, right? Right. And he had his aide hand over the dossier that was truly fraudulent, that was one of the bases of why Trump needed to be investigated. Which brings me to the second guy in charge of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, another globalist hack. Do you remember that during the campaign it actually came out that Andrew McCabe's wife previously ran for the Virginia Senate seat? And she was given a total of, according to Sarah Carter, and I agree with her analysis, up to $700,000 by Democratic operatives that were in collusion with Hillary Clinton to Andrew McCabe's wife. Now, why is that important? Because Andrew McCabe was put in charge of analyzing Hillary's email issues. Oh! Conflict of interest, right? Well, now, for a while, Andrew McCabe was acting director of the FBI when Comey was, good riddance, fired by Trump. But remember, during all of this, General Michael Flynn was fired because he had spoken to a Russian ambassador or several ambassadors during the transition. Well, that story just doesn't hold any water, right? And my sources tell me there's a lot more to come on this, of which I can't speak about yet. But the question is, why did Flynn get hammered? I mean, he was just hammered by the FBI, which led to Trump firing Flynn. Well, this came out on Circa, which is a great news site, alternative news site, CIRCA. I encourage you, circa.com. This is from the other day. Title, McCabe's Revenge. Circa suggests Flynn investigation was launched as pure retaliation. Oh, this ought to be interesting. In a stunning new report, Circa reveals why Michael Flynn investigation may be nothing more than an act of retaliation orchestrated by acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe after Michael Flynn personally supported a female FBI agent that had filed a sexual discrimination lawsuit against McCabe back in 2012. See, a high-level FBI operative that I understand has impeccable connections, but also a background and credentials. A woman was being discriminated against because she was a woman by McCabe. And Flynn went to bat for her because he had worked with her and knew how good she was. And McCabe, being the little globalist fascist, because remember, they're all based in fascism, that he is, was so incensed that someone would take him on that he decided that he was going to help take Flynn down. There's another reason why General Flynn, they tried to take him down, is because remember, somewhere in the end of the Obama administration, it came out that the Obama administration had funded, weaponized, and trained people that ended up being involved in running ISIS. So when Donald Trump during the campaign said Barack Obama was the CEO and Hillary Clinton was the COO of ISIS, many people snickered and laughed. He was absolutely correct. In fact, and we'll get into this in future shows, it's when Benghazi was all about. Benghazi was a weapons running operation that went bad. And they needed to, if you will, tie up loose ends which is why 4 Americans died there, because those individuals, at least one of them, Stevens, the ambassador, was the guy running the operation on the ground and running weapons. First to the rebels that ended up taking over Libya and killing Gaddafi, and then reversing those arms and sending them into Turkey, a destination into Syria, to fund, support, and train ISIS. Yeah. Truth. We've had a number of people on Operation Freedom discussing this. General Paul Vallely, Clara Lopez, former CIA Middle East analyst, several other CIA analysts. We've had the relative of Sean Smith, one of the 4 individuals who died in Benghazi, speaking about this, of all the research their family has done into it. Now, you see, Mike Flynn, when he was head of the DIA, leaked some of the documents related to that. And they wanted to get back at Flynn because they were afraid if Flynn continued in his position of power within the Trump administration, it all would have been outed, and it would have been outed quickly, knowing Mike Flynn. They had to get rid of him. But that story, I believe, is not done at all. And you might be surprised of what comes out in the very near future from alternative media sources as it relates to what really the whole Michael Flynn firing issue was about. Their narrative, that fake Russian narrative, is falling apart at the seams. Whether it's about McCabe going after Flynn and why he really did it because McCabe was sexually discriminating against a female FBI executive, or the media and CNN, how they were fabricating information, pushing a false story. But there's something else the lamestream fake media won't tell you. There's something happened just this week, this past Wednesday. Obama's Homeland Security Secretary, Jay Johnson, testified to the House Intel Committee. What? You didn't hear this in the mainstream media? Right, because they're not going to talk about this. Here's what he said. That, quote, Putin and the Russians failed to alter ballots, ballot counts, or the reporting of election results, end quote. You see, folks, the fake Russian narrative was created to take attention away from the fact that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were involved in an email scandal using illegal servers. Obama had a false pseudonym, if you will, a pseudonym that he was emailing Hillary back and forth, that they were sharing classified top secret information. This was a breach in security, put every operative of the United States in harm's way, if not led to a number of them being killed that hasn't been reported. And they compromised our national security. And in fact, as will be pointed out later in this show, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama should be held accountable via the Espionage Act, and I believe would be found guilty. The Russian narrative is meant to distract you, to take your attention away from those facts. There's another reason. It's to take attention away from the fact that the DNC was not hacked. It wasn't hacked. That the information that eventually got to Julian Assange at WikiLeaks was in fact leaked. And it was leaked by one, if not more people, but one of the people it was leaked by is now dead. His name is Seth Rich. He was killed in July of 2016. You see, if they keep pushing this Russian narrative, they keep you distracted from the fact of what really Hillary and Obama did to compromise international security. And they also want to distract you from the fact that this was not a hack, it was a leak. And the main guy who helped leak this information is now dead. And the question is, who killed him? And finally, the Russian hack story was meant to also delegitimize the election of Donald Trump. Look, is Trump a globalist? I don't think so, based on how they're reacting to him. Does he have globalist friends? Yep. Did he potentially hang out in the globalist circle, if you will? I think tangentially, yeah. But he's obviously not one of them. Because if he was one of them, they wouldn't be reacting to him the way they are. That's for certain. You know, it's interesting because one of the pieces of information that's sifted out is that, well, the DNC, when they were approached by Homeland Security and the FBI, they didn't turn over their servers. Which really is kind of interesting, isn't it? I mean, if you believe you've been hacked, why wouldn't you just, here you go, look, find out what happened here. But reportedly, they didn't. But you see, right now, you can tell the house of cards of the globalists is falling apart because they're starting to squeal on each other. The rats are biting the other rats. What do I mean by that? Well, this is through youngcons.com. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the head of the DNC when all this goat rodeo was going on with the election, who ended up being removed because, remember, she was in collusion with CNN with Donna Brazile, another CNN wonderful moment. Debbie Wasserman Schultz put out a statement disputing former DHS Secretary Jay Johnson's testimony, that I mentioned part of it earlier to you, that the DNC refused to help to protect its network despite receiving warnings about a hack. Well, wait a minute. Now, Wasserman Schultz is saying, wait a minute. No, this Jay Johnson guy isn't telling the truth when it comes to us not wanting to hand over the servers. She goes on. Jay Johnson and former FBI Director Comey both testified that the DNC refused to turn over the servers so that they could examine it and investigate the hack. But Wasserman Schultz's statement disputed that, saying that they had never contacted her. Rat turning on rat. Seemingly directly contradicting their testimony, which was under oath. Wasserman Schultz then doubled down and gave an interview where she ripped the FBI and DHS for doing nothing to help the DNC. Oh, maybe she didn't like being put on point on this one, huh? Goes on. This is from the Free Beacon. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz said Thursday that Jay Johnson's congressional testimony on the Democratic National Committee's computer hack is, quote, wrong in every respect and utterly misinformed, end quote. Quote, he's wrong in every respect, Schultz told, Kate Boudin. Let me be very clear. At no point during my tenure at the DNC was I contacted by the FBI, DHS, or any government agency or alerted or made aware that they believed that the Russians, an enemy state, was intruding on our network, end quote. The former DNC chair then blamed the FBI and other federal agencies for not stepping in. Hey, they left the Russians on our network for almost a year before we discovered that they were there, end quote. So what's going on here? Well, it could be that Comey and Jay Johnson knew that there was never any Russian hack. And they wanted to make it look like they were doing their jobs as great investigators. So they said, oh, yeah, we asked them, but they said there was nothing there. They didn't want it. Meanwhile, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is getting pinched on another side. And my guess is she realized, wait a minute. They're setting me up for a fall. Because remember, when they removed her as head of the DNC in the middle of the election cycle because she colluded with CNN about giving questions to Donna Brazile in the Hillary Clinton-Bernie Sanders debates, what happened to Debbie Wasserman Schultz? She became an, quote, an advisor, senior advisor to Hillary Clinton, end quote, and made a great salary. So they said, listen, Debbie, take the hit on this. On the CNN thing and maybe even this server thing, and we'll pay you. We'll pay you a lot of money. Just be quiet. Just go along with it. Well, somewhere along the line of late, Wasserman Schultz has realized, wait a minute. They're setting me up for I might go to prison. I might be involved in obstruction of justice issues. I'm talking. Because she's involved in another issue that the lamestream fake media is not going to talk about, and that's more computer issues, only this time in Congress, and a huge security breach. Headline from the Daily Caller: House Dems hired a fired McDonald's worker as their IT guy. The guy can't even handle an order of fries, and he's the IT guy for Debbie Wasserman Schultz and 8 leading Democrats in the House. Multiple members of Congress hired as their information technology administrator an individual whose most recent job experience was being fired from McDonald's. The Daily Caller News Foundation's investigative group has learned. Goes on. The hiring decisions highlight the role the representatives played in what turned out to be an alleged multi-million-dollar IT scam in Congress with serious implications for national security. Here we go again with national security. Good old Barack and Hillary blew it apart, and now we got folks in Congress. By the way, all Democrat globalists compromising your, mine, every American's national security. Goes on. Soon after Imran Awan, and Awan is the key name here, joined the staff of Florida Democrat Debbie Wasserman Schultz, here she is again, in 2005, he brought his brothers, Abid, Jamal, his wife, Haina, and his brother's wife, Natala, all appeared on other members' payrolls, supposedly as IT administrators, but they were rarely seen or heard from, according to IT sources. The crew is now the target of a U.S. Capitol Police criminal information security probe with assistance from other law enforcement agencies. The, quote, House staffers are accused of stealing equipment from members' offices without their knowledge and committing serious, potentially illegal violations on the House IT network that affected national security. Abbas, McDonald's dude, administered the email accounts and computers of 8 members of Congress, all Dems and all globalists, according to official payroll records. House IT administrators can read all emails sent and received by members for whom they worked. That includes classified information, by the way. For years, Abbas was the only IT worker for Democrat Rep. Emanuel Cleaver of Missouri and the only DC-based one for Ted Deutsch of Florida, both affirmed globalists. The Daily Caller interviewed multiple people who knew Imran, who was, if you will, the ringleader, and personally said he boasted that he had outsized influence over numerous Democratic lawmakers. Oh, maybe he saw some of this collusion going on, said, Congressman, Congresswoman, I saw this. Boy, if, that would be terrible if that got out. It's called blackmail. Wasserman Schultz, you'll love this, has refused to fire Imran. What? Why would you refuse to fire a goat like this guy? Refused to fire Imran despite House authorities banning him from accessing official computers. She also threatened the Capitol Police with, quote, consequences if they didn't return a computer Imran that was later seized as evidence in the investigation. Previously, another House Democrat House IT worker told the Daily Caller, quote, there's probably a core of 8 or 10 members that know what's going on, including Wasserman Schultz. Several members should be kicked off the hill, end quote. I don't know if you remember this, but soon after Donald Trump assumed the presidency, I believe that the raid, Navy SEAL raid, was in Yemen. A Navy SEAL died and several others were wounded. The SEALs said when they walked into that raid, they felt that it was not really a raid that they were expected, that there was some breach of security somewhere along the line, and they walked into a shooting gallery. Let me connect the dots. These Imran brothers potentially were that security breach. That they had access to 8 members, including Wasserman Schultz, who's a high-ranking member of Congress. They had access to classified information that involved our military and the missions of our military people would be on. It could well be that these Imran brothers funneled that information to the jihadis in Yemen. And that led to that Navy SEAL's death and the injuries to the other Navy SEALs that were sustained on that raid on that day. Folks, it's fallen apart for the globalists. And frankly, we need to make sure it falls apart even quicker, and that's where you come in. The way this falls apart quicker is you taking this information and networking it to get as many people on our caravan as we can, so they have access to this information, to these presentations that John B. Wells does and that I do. And this is how we win this war for our freedoms, our liberties, and the future of our families and our country. We have some great interviews today. Dream big, dare to fail, and we're going to come back with some great segments momentarily. Thanks for joining me.